All right, Matt, thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit more about what you do here at Michigan State University. What's your job title and
Okay.
what does that entail?
So my name is Matt Grieshop. I'm the Organic Pest Management Specialist at Michigan State University. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Entomology. So my position has a three-way split. I develop research programs, so I work a lot with graduate students, postdoctoral research associates, other faculty. I develop extension programs, so I work quite a bit with growers. And then I also teach. So presently I teach one 3-credit course every year, Organic Pest Management.
Tell us a little bit more about your specific area of study. So you combine kind of agroecological principles with entomology.
So yeah, my charge is really development of pest management strategies that are more ecologically oriented. So from an organic perspective, that would mean that they meet the National Organic Program standards, or the NOP standards. But from more of an ecological standpoint or agroecological standpoint, it means that I study the ecology and behavior of insects, less the behavior of weeds and diseases, and try to help growers come up with ways to non-chemically or with reduced chemistries manage pests.
So what brought your interest to agroecology and entomology? Were you first kind of interested in pest management and agriculture, or were you more interested in the insect side of things? How did that all come together for you?
I would consider myself probably an agricultural scientist first and an entomologist second. That said, I always had an interest in insects growing up. My parents were avid gardeners. I spent a lot of time picking tomato hornworms off tomatoes and collecting praying mantises and doing things like that. In terms of my academic training, I really came at entomology through more of an agroecological lens. I was at the University of California at Santa Cruz and worked as an undergraduate research technician with mating disruption for codling moth and some biocontrol programs in strawberries, artichokes, and apples. And that really sort of gave me my first experience with pest management as a discipline.
You went on to Montana State and Kansas State for your graduate degrees. Were those particularly good choices for you because of the agroecology, because of the entomology that was there? Or were you kind of blazing a new field even in graduate school?
I would say that I'm a little bit of an unusual academic for my discipline in that I'm really more of a generalist than a specialist, meaning that I like to work in many different systems, and what I really find joy in is finding similarities between systems and figuring out low impact ways of manipulating them. In terms of my graduate education, it was really project driven. So when I was looking for a master's degree, I visited quite a few land grant schools that had biological control and sustainable ag programs. That was right at the beginning of the World Wide Web. So I drove across the country, had a white paper that sort of gave me names of faculty to talk to, and I cold called them. And it just turned out that there was a biocontrol of weeds project for rangeland in Montana that was very interesting to me. Kansas State was sort of a similar thing. There was, after my master's degree, I worked as a technician for a while in cultural management of stored product pests, and looking at more basic biology and behavior of a regional wheat pest, the wheat stem sawfly. And that sort of led me into stored products, and I got interested in biocontrol in that environment. And there was a good project down at Kansas State to get involved with. So for me, it's always been more the project first and the discipline second, I guess. And again, I'm a generalist by nature, so I think that fits me pretty well.
So having a broad understanding around ecological basis allows you probably to do your entomological job with a little bit more context and kind of understanding of a lot of different settings.
Yeah, for me, the research I am involved in some fundamental research, which is more pure biology or ecology, but that's really a small part of what I do. For me, the drive has always been to figure out ways to develop better agricultural applications. So I work a lot with farmers and with people who are growing food for a living. So really, for me, that necessitates a very holistic approach towards any kind of problem in the system. Because one thing I've learned in my time as an ag researcher and extension educator is that you can come up with a solution for a problem, but if your solution creates more problems, a grower is never going to adopt it because they're risk adverse and they have enough things to balance as it is.
So what are some of your favorite parts of your job?
For me, what really keeps me engaged and going from a day-to-day perspective is I really enjoy working with farmers, and I enjoy working with students quite a bit.
Okay. So how much do you get to interact with farmers in your job, and do you do on-farm research, and how does that work?
So I interact with farmers quite a bit, I think. I develop research projects with organic farmers typically, sometimes with conventional farmers depending on the technological aspects of what we're working with and how it fits with the National Organic Program. I would say during the summer I'm on farms probably at least 2 days out of 5 work days. I also am the coordinator for a research farm, so I spend a lot of time working with a farm staff coordinating research activities at the Clarksville Research Center. So I spend a fair amount of time on farm. During the winter, not so much. I might get on farm once a month if I'm lucky. As I've moved up in terms of my career, it seems like I spend a little less time doing research and a little more time planning and administering, writing grants.
Yep. So as far as your research right now, are there particular projects you'd like to share about? I know that you've presented to my class about your apple project before. What do you see as some of the solutions you've been able to provide for farmers, and where do you maybe see research going in the next 10, 15 years?
Okay, well, currently I typically have a pretty wide range of research going on in my lab. I typically have between 3 and 5 grad students and maybe 2 or 3 postdoctoral research associates that I work with. Currently, we've got a couple of projects looking at native sources of biological control for the invasive insect, the brown marmorated stink bug, and we're finishing up work on that project. I have another sort of ongoing set of work with another invasive insect, the spotted-winged Drosophila Suzuki'i. And that has been a really game-changing pest for Michigan small fruit producers, especially organic producers. And that's an interesting, we're really just getting started with that insect. Some of what we're doing is looking at really classical insecticide type research. We're also looking at a lot of behavioral research and phenological research, and trying to figure out how this pest makes its living in the colder parts of the Michigan season. We think that's a very important thing to know, and my colleagues and I haven't quite figured that one out yet. We also have another project where we're looking at the delivery, reimagining the way we deliver agricultural inputs into trellised perennial fruit. So that's a solid set canopy delivery system. And that's a project that's really just building again. And there, my interests are figuring out delivery systems for biological inputs suited for organic agriculture. A lot of what we're doing right now is just engineering and figuring out how to make the system work, but down the road I see it as a means for delivering pathogenic organisms for pest management, biological nutrient inputs, and other biological inputs, which is really critical for us in this region because we do have such a tremendous amount of pests to manage. Previous work we've done in my lab, one of my favorite projects was a hog-apple integration project. We worked with a grower. It was really grower-conceived research, and we were looking at seasonal flash grazing or intensive grazing of small feeder hogs in apple orchards to intercept a variety of different pests, ranging from weeds to a couple of primary insect pests, the plum curculio and the codling moth. And then also we were interested in whether or not hogs might have an impact on some of the fungal diseases that plague apple growers. That was a really fun project, and there are a few apple growers across the country who are using that technology really out of that project. It's a very, the scale of that technology is really suited for smaller producers. So I don't think it'll see widespread adoption in mass apple production. There are some online resources, and I'm shamefully not as aware of those. I can't give you a URL off the top of my head. But what I would really encourage an ambitious undergraduate who's interested in agricultural research to get on the departmental web pages, look at what faculty are doing in terms of research, and try to send an email, try to set up a meeting and visit. I typically, when we're hiring undergraduates, we typically advertise with flyers, and then we'll advertise through the Lyman Briggs program and some of the other programs on campus. But oftentimes I get people by word of mouth. People have heard of the lab or and come and introduce themselves, and if I'm looking for somebody, then oftentimes it'll work out. And in my department at least, I mean, what I find with the colleagues I work with, we rely really heavily on undergraduate labor, and we provide a lot of research training to undergraduates, hands-on research training. And really the coolest part about it is just typically it's paid. So we don't typically have volunteer labor. We're actually paying undergrads and providing them with training. In my lab, the way that usually works is I have undergrads who help specific graduate students or postdoctoral research associates. If I'm directly managing a project, I might have undergrads working directly with me. But since my program is so broad, we have all kinds of undergrads. I hire engineering students, I hire fish and wildlife students, I hire zoology students, I have had entomology students and crop and soil students. It really is pretty wide.
So you teach an organic pest management class, as well as a couple other related classes. Are there any particular courses or areas of study that you would recommend for students who are interested in this field that they should maybe get in before they leave undergraduate?
Well, from my perspective, I'll just speak towards one discipline because I could talk about this for a while. But in entomology, I am pretty convinced that if you're interested in a career in agricultural entomology, getting some courses in microbiology and getting some courses in molecular biology, developing some hands-on skills with molecular techniques is really going to serve you well. We're really at the cusp. It seems like every 6 months there's a breakthrough in terms of how we sequence genes, or our ability to amplify genes so that we can detect certain things, or our ability to extract genes out of systems. One of my students is working on essentially a system where we're collecting insects from the soil. We're doing some morphological ID, but really what he's working on is grinding them all up and then using molecular techniques to identify what's there. And I really think that's the future, because the level of precision and the number of samples you can collect using that type of an approach is huge. On the microbiology side, given the molecular tool set we have now and our ability to interact with the microbial world, I see that as just an area of huge growth in almost every biological field. But in entomology, I think there's a lot of interest in harnessing natural pathogens to develop new bioinsecticides, for instance. So I really think that's a good area to get into. I think that over the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see a lot of exciting developments based on new molecular techniques and our knowledge of microbiology. And I really feel that, across disciplines, in entomology, where we might be more concerned about upregulating beneficial insects and downregulating pest insects, understanding the microbiome that inhabit insects could be very powerful for that. Understanding pathogenic organisms that attack insects could be very important for that. For soil science, equally so. We're really, we know almost nothing about the ecology of our soils, and a lot of that's because we haven't had the tools to actually see what's going on. But our molecular toolkit is really allowing us to ask questions that we just could never ask before. So I think it's a very exciting time, and I think our understanding of how the microbial world interacts with the macro world, I think, is going to be a really exciting place for agroecology.
Thanks so much for your time today, Matt.
No problem. My pleasure, Julie. Thank you.